This is Illuminate, the podcast about men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better. Welcome to Illuminate. I'm your host, Chris Tirick, and in this preview episode, I'd like to talk to you about why I started this podcast. To do so, I'm going to share with you a piece that I wrote on Substack a month ago. In it, I wrote, I've put a ton of energy over the last 3 decades of my life working on myself while simultaneously supporting others. I've felt like I've been doing the right thing, fighting the right fights. I've certainly had my share of struggles where I haven't shown up as a good human, haven't been a supportive partner, and failed to uplift a colleague. But my trajectory has been in the right direction. And I felt our society's trajectory has followed suit. We've had our ups and downs, but the trend has been in the right direction. But the one group that has struggled the most with this progress is men. A society built primarily by men and for men rightfully improves to empower women and others. We haven't really asked the questions. How are men doing through all of this? How can men thrive in a more diverse, equitable world? I ask these questions against the backdrop of our ongoing cultural and political battles in which a brash brand of masculinity, seemingly devoid of empathy, has been widely embraced by men, including larger segments of young men. In the most recent election cycle, ultra-popular podcasters influenced millions with this uber-traditional masculine message. It's easy to cast a negative light over men and call their masculine energy toxic. It's easy to blame men for all that ails our society. It's harder to ask a deeper question. Why are so many men struggling to find a place as men in an increasingly diverse and equitable world? Why is there so much backlash? I have to believe a more equitable world is unfamiliar territory that men are generally unprepared to enter. We have to offer grace. In some areas, men are expected to play different, healthier roles in society, but often men don't know how to move toward a more modern, more fully human masculinity. We're expecting men to discard their traditional programming without the resources to write new code. In the words of author Richard Reeves in Of Boys and Men, a man is torn between the kind of man he was told to be and the kind of man the world needs. As an aside, Reeves' book is an excellent dive into this topic, even if I don't subscribe to all of his prescriptive remedies. I have to believe that there are enough men with good hearts who are simply lost. They're disconnected, disaffected. Without a lighthouse, they're attracted to what's familiar, what welcomes them, even if they know in their gut it's not right. It's these men and boys who need a life preserver, a lighthouse, maybe just something familiar to guide them through the often confusing expectations of today's world. It's really hard to rail against your programming when boys and young men are taught to be one thing and the world needs them to be something else. I believe men need the examples of and connection with other men who have found a way to open their minds and hearts to embrace the realities of a world where everyone, including men, can feel empowered, heard, and rewarded. It's really hard work. I don't stand here virtuous among the struggling. I just know that the most rewarding moments of my life have been when I've done the work to be a whole and connected human, rather than masquerade as some predetermined notion of what I'm supposed to be. We men sell ourselves and the world short when we don't allow ourselves permission to do this necessary work. I've spent a good amount of time on the social media site Threads lately, engaging in conversations on the topic. It's definitely a hot topic. As you might expect, there's a wide variety of opinions, including a significant amount of anger and venom, most of which comes from men. This anger can be explained, even if we never excuse the behavior. There's also a receptive middle of both men and women who see the nuance that exists in what is too often seen through a binary filter. We can be completely in support of gender equity for women and also acknowledge and do something about the fact that men and boys are struggling. I can't even begin to solve these issues on my own, but I have to do something. My mind and heart won't rest until I do. I have to believe that there are a lot of men lost at sea and just need a guide, an example toward the shore. I believe the stories of men who have found secure and healthy footing on the right side of progress can be that example. So I've decided to launch Illuminate, the podcast that tells the stories of men with good hearts, open minds, and a desire to make the world better for everyone, not just them and theirs. This podcast will be the real stories of men's lives, their influences and role models, and how they've worked to develop themselves. Being a whole contributing human takes work, and men are no exception. These won't be stories of men who have discarded their masculinity. Rather, I hope to bring forward examples of confident men who work to avoid arrogance, loyal men who hold themselves and each other accountable, bold men who take responsibility for their actions and impact, resilient men who have found healthy, genuine expression of their emotions and cultivate their mental health, leaders who uplift, amplify, and serve, independent men who build and embrace community, providers and equal partnerships, fathers who are emotionally attuned and deeply connected to their children, protectors who extend cover beyond their inner circle, men who have discovered a wholeness in their humanity that delivers the benefits to them and the world around them. My hope is that these stories will give men a push to dive more deeply into their own growth and be inspired to see an evolved masculinity as an opportunity for deeper meaning and connection along a journey to human wholeness. Now that you understand why I've started Illuminate, let me talk to you a little bit about this podcast. On the day after Christmas, I posted something to Threads saying that I was interested in talking to men with good hearts, open minds, and who wanted to make the world better. It was as simple of a post as that. And it went about as viral as I've ever gone viral on social media in my entire life. And I've been on social media for quite a while. And at the end of 72 hours, the post had about 40,000 views, all kinds of comments from people, men and women, saying how they just thought this was a really great idea and something that the world needed. And along with that post, I had added a form that if any men wanted to sign up to be a guest on the show, all they had to do was fill out this form. Pretty easy. Tell me the highlights of your story and why you want to be on the podcast and send it in. Within 72 hours, I had 90 men who had signed up to be guests on this show. As you can imagine, I was somewhat overwhelmed with the response. It's absolutely amazing, fantastic. It makes me realize even more that this is something that I need to do and that the world needs to hear. So I jumped right in. I started recording. I chose from the 90, I chose 5 men who uh, seemed like they had really good stories that would resonate with people, and reached out, contacted them, and said, "Hey, let's get in the studio and record these conversations." And we did that over the course of 3 days. I recorded the first 5 episodes, and I want to give you a little sneak peek into the men that I interviewed, and a little bit about their stories and their insight. We've had conversations about what drives them, what their motivation is, who their role models are, what role community plays in their lives, how they view personal growth, and what things they've had to deconstruct in order to get to be the man they are today. You'll get to see the full episodes of my conversations with these 5 men over the next 5 weeks. I'll release one each week on Wednesday, and then aim to release a new episode each week. And it looks like with 90 men, that's about 2 years worth of episodes. So we're going to keep this going as long as we possibly can. And I am really so looking forward to sharing these stories with you. The stories themselves have been so rewarding to me already. I would probably do this even if nobody listens to the podcast, but I think it's going to be well worth your listen. So here's a sneak preview of our first 5 guests on Illuminate.
A big part of my growth is just really deconstructing the fact that as much as I want to control how things are, and there's just things, it's just not going to happen. What I really need to focus on is how I react to things.
One of the truisms that I've stumbled into in my life is that I think vulnerability is truly a strength. It takes a strong person, and if we're talking about men here specifically, I think it takes a strong man to be vulnerable, and that's something that our culture doesn't readily embrace yet.
My identity had always been within the church, and the thought of leaving this church, which I loved doing. I loved being a part of this community. Just the thought of leaving that and trying to find something new, because we didn't want to leave the church altogether. It was just the specific denomination we couldn't be a part of. But just the thought of leaving that was extremely fearful, and just like, I don't like it like causes like shakes like throughout your body.
You're going to screw yourself over and deny yourself meaningful, authentic love and relationships in your life if you can't be vulnerable and be authentic with the people around you. Like, holy crap. And yet our society spends so much time and energy convincing boys never to do that.
There's something unique in each one of us, some flame that makes you you. And a lot of times it doesn't actually have to do with what is our W-2, as I call it, like what is our paycheck. Stay close to that, because change will happen, change will come, and there will be moments that you feel extremely lonely. And it will feel dark in the world. But you have that unique flame. Turn to that, like remember that.
When it comes to talking to other men, you just have that guy who you can say, hey, listen, nobody's going to understand this, but you will. And so here is the thing.
I train myself to think, as long as I don't bother people with my own struggles, then I'm being a good whatever, a good friend, a good son, a good brother, a good spouse, a good and really what that is denying that person the opportunity to be an equal partner in that relationship.
We've been told a lot throughout our lives, you can't really question these kinds of things.
I believe we have an opportunity and an obligation to reach back out to younger men and essentially be mentors to them, to guide them, to help them quiet things down a little bit. I mean, there's just so much coming at them. You and I grew up in an era where we were not barraged by what people are barraged by today. And I'm grateful that we had that.
I tend to be like, I'll handle it myself thing. I eventually, though, I'd say in the mid 90s, got introduced to therapy, and that was phenomenal. So there are times where, now I'm proactive. If I know, like, do you know what's going to hit the fan? There's going to be a transition or something coming up. I'll reach out to my therapist and be like, hey, we should talk and, figure out how I'm going to manage this thing.
I think we get to a point where we hold on to the reins of what we learned a little too tightly. And we don't understand that there is still growth to be done, and you have to work your way through all of that stuff, regardless of your faith walk, regardless of, whatever your ideology is. Like, you have to really figure out how to walk through all of that stuff and how to develop within all of it, so that you can develop a healthy, balanced mindset.
A lot of the viewpoints that I've come to now, my family, like me and my family, especially me and my parents, my brother, we would definitely differ on a lot. I know but despite those differences, I know that they're always like there to support me.
The fact that I've never been back to, and may not ever be able to go back to where I first entered this world, it's always been a bit of a pang on my heart. And so I think that sort of planted the seeds to the rest of my journey in life.
And I'm better when I'm somewhere in the middle. And so my life's project, sort of the heart of your question about deconstructing things, has been trying to identify how those poles, those extreme versions show up in my own life, being able to recognize them so that I can try and pull myself towards the middle. And I'm never done. I'm never done, because I will always pull a little too far back. And then I got to push that pendulum back the other way again some more. And so I tend to think of like this mental image of a grandfather clock in my head all the time. The pendulum swings from side to side. And I sort of view my life's project as trying to get that pendulum to swing less and less and less and less.
You can learn more about Illuminate at illuminate.substack.com. We are also streaming on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Illuminate.